All right, all Israel News viewers, we have a huge privilege today, and we are joined with Dr. Chris McKinney. We're going to be discussing a new docudrama called Legends of the Lost Ark. And so we get to hear from him himself, this researcher, professor, both archaeologist and academic, theologian. And so, would you just first introduce yourself and tell us just 60 seconds a bit about yourself?
So my name is Chris McKinney. I am an associate professor of archaeology at the Lanier Center for Archaeology. It is one of the world leading biblical archaeology centers for sure in North America. It's at Lipscomb University here in Nashville, Tennessee. I spent all of my graduate career going to Jerusalem University College for a
So you
degree, which
lived here.
I lived there for many years, and I go there for months every year. And I did my PhD at Bar Ilan University in Ramat Gan. And so I am a hopeless addict when it comes to the world of the Bible in terms of biblical archaeology, geography, culture. It's just so fascinating. And really all of that stems from a childhood that grew up in the church, had a wonderful granddad who was also a pastor, told me all kinds of stories about the founding of the state of Israel and history, World War II. And then I came to Israel when I was a teenager, what I call kind of
Okay.
a goyish bar mitzvah when I was 13, and I just saw that the stuff was real, and I can go and participate in this process, and wanted to be an archaeologist from a very young age.
Okay, that's so interesting. Did you want to be an archaeologist before or after your first trip as a teenager here?
Really, it was that first trip that I knew I wanted to study the Bible, and I knew I loved history. And so seeing the archaeology of Megiddo, the Temple Mount, back then it was really easy to go into the Dome of the Rock before the Second Intifada started. And so seeing this stuff and like, wow, I can just go and touch it with my hands. I can experience it and then study it more and then learn more about it. I just thought, look, we can look at the biblical text a million different ways, and people have. We need to continue to do so. But what if we were to be in a field in which every year new stuff was found that shed more light on the biblical text and the biblical world? And that's what's so fascinating about biblical archaeology is every year we never know what is going to be found that can really change our perspective on how we read the text and really the world behind the text.
It's amazing. I am so similar in my upbringing, as many viewers know, and I just can't believe this is my backyard. I mean, I live on a overlook. You can see the old city and the Mount of Olives, and even just this past weekend being, Resurrection Sunday, you're like, whoa, you're gonna come back. And so watching your film specifically in this season of Holy Week and Pesach, really, really brought a level of hunger and anticipation, even in the discoveries, both archaeologically as well as the prophecies to come. So, could you give us just a synopsis, maybe 1, 2 minutes, about what the film Legends of the Lost Ark is about?
Yeah, so Legends of the Lost Ark is a film that is documentary in nature. It's specifically investigative in that it is exploring the question of what happened to the Lost Ark, but specifically through the lens of what did the earliest sources that we have say happened to it. And so at the end of the day, everyone wants to know where it is and how do we find it. But that may not be a question we can answer. Everyone, though, is answering it in ways that are obscure and conspiracy theory driven, or whatever one kind of armchair archaeologist is trying to do, and ignoring the most ancient sources. And so we immersed ourselves in these three ancient legends that all emerge after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BC, and really grappling with the question of what did Judeans living in the Second Temple period, how did they understand their relationship to the temple in light of the ark's absence? And then I'd say another component that we do include in the film that I think is really important and something I've been interested in a long time is really, okay, if we're looking for the ark, what is the ark, and more, what did it look like? People just assume they know what the ark looked like, and if you look throughout time, today, if you do a search, it will bring up Indiana Jones, which isn't a bad depiction. If you did it before Champollion deciphered Egyptian or Napoleon went to Egypt in 799, you have a completely different perspective on what the Ark was. It's this box with fat babies on it. So what did it actually look like? And so that was a part that I really loved being a part of in research and designing it. And it's clear that it's from the era of ancient Egypt and Israel's interaction with them because we have these same objects. And so I'd say both of those components, the realia of the world of the Hebrew Bible in which ancient Israel was set and the Ark story happened. We're kind of telling that story all the way through. But we're also specifically investigating these legends in light of history, in light of the biblical text, and in light of various aspects.
And I want to get into those three legends. But first, I want to mention yesterday, a friend of mine who's Jewish and her background was religious. We were talking, and I was talking about the docudrama, and she asked what it was about. And we have these translation differences, you know. And so she's like, "What, Ark of the Covenant?" And I'm like, "I know it's in your scriptures." So we're trying to find the words. And she's like, "Oh, it's translated for us Ark of Promise." Or she was trying to find the words. So we were talking about the difference of Ark of Promise, Ark of the Covenant. I don't remember the exact Hebrew, but then that was interesting to me talking about to somebody who's grown up in Judaism that as we're talking about what is this, there was questions about just the significance to Christians as well that she had, like, oh, this matters to you as well. Oh, that makes sense. And so for me, that was a cool bridge as well to real
Yeah.
life here and our shared spiritual heritage. But in those three, I think it was the rock, the tomb, and the mount.
Mhm.
When did you first start encountering these legends, these ideas, these traditions, and did one capture your imagination that sparked the inspiration to create this film and research? Or just tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the process of making this film is long and complicated, and I'd say it really is. I could define it as a process of making multiple films or attempts at multiple films with Gesher Media, whose goal is to be a bridge between the world of the Bible and a lay audience,
Mhm.
and lots of difficulties, things like COVID and October 7th and access to the country. We finally, I think back in 2024, I'm doing all this research for the story of the Ark and these legends. And then it was like, well, you're the person that's doing the research. Why don't you get on camera and tell us the research as you're doing it? This is what our director, Stephen Pettit said. And so it was really kind of a strange thing because most of the time you do a documentary based on research, the book is written, it's out there. But this is a rare situation where there is a book coming out, Legends of the Lost Ark with Gesher, but it's also very fresh. And I'm still continuing to work, not so much on the legends, but all these different aspects of the Ark. And so you asked me also about the legends themselves, what attracted me. I think what really attracts me is the constellation of features that are common to the three legends. That is, all three legends assert that it is Jeremiah who is the one who is connected with the hiding of the Ark of the Covenant. They all say that it happens before 586 BCE or BC in Jerusalem when Jerusalem falls. That therefore it happens before the Babylonian conquest of the city, and they all agree on like these key components. They also agree that it will be revealed at the end, and it has to happen for these particular reasons. But they just disagree on its location. And so, what I was interested in, besides what this might mean for the discovery of the Ark, is exploring why they would think that, why they would focus on that, and how they grappled with this question of God's presence is gone. And there, we can connect with, of course, Jeremiah, but Ezekiel, when Ezekiel's vision of the wheel within the wheel, the cherubim, of the chariot, or the chariot of the cherubim, God's presence leaving the temple
Yeah.
and going to the Mount of Olives, which you just mentioned, and going into exile with his people. At the end of that book, it's supposed to return. Does that mean that the spirit returns to the ark, which was like all these
Mhm.
questions the
Questions.
Bible never really addresses
Mm.
in depth? These legends come in and try to answer.
That's true. And it's interesting you mentioned that it's a different approach to a documentary, that you were doing the research as you went. And that's something that was intriguing to me because we're discovering alongside you, truly, like as the film is unfolding. Was there something that was the most surprising moment? I want to know, surprising, discouraging, and rewarding. So you could take any order that you want.
I think the most surprising thing, and this is early on in the research, is just the realization that the Ark of the Covenant has a very clear archaeological background. That, and this is actually something that even though scholars today mostly have forgotten, they have forgotten it. This was discovered already in ancient Egypt, or I should say, when ancient Egypt was recovered, the first scholars start looking at these boxes that they see on these walls of these temples carried by priests on poles with these winged creatures, and they say, that's like the Ark of the Covenant. And this was what people were saying for
Interesting.
about a century, up until something like the beginning of World War II, and then people stopped saying it. And then you start just in the last 10 years, people saying, oh, it actually it's ancient Egypt, and they don't realize they're rediscovering this whole process. And so that research, and the more I look at it, it's just such an obvious thing. This looks like that, and it matches the period in which it was found. So in terms of disturbing, you said disturbing and
Or
disappointing.
discouraging and then rewarding.
Oh yeah, so discouraging. I think that the making of films is very hard. Like it's like five dissertations, and plus you're writing it with people that are all over the world. So it's a complicated process. If I were to pinpoint one thing in terms of like the production of it, we really wanted to go to explore the legends in Jordan, and did
Yes.
we're not able to get permission to do so. I still think there is much that can be done on that front. So that was one of the more discouraging things. I think the most rewarding thing I would say about this study, because I have a deep interest not only in the material world of the Bible, I'm also interested in it as literature in its own right, regardless of its historicity, which I think there's historical background, and seeing especially this epic literature that we find with God as king and his throne and the ark, how epics of the past, whether we talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey, and you should go see Christopher Nolan this summer, that's going to be excellent, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, or whatever, King Arthur and the Grail. All of these stories center often around these material objects. The best of these, a modern one, is The Lord of the Rings, in
Yeah.
which the entire story is told through this little gold shiny thing.
Mhm.
And so, in some sense, the Ark of the Covenant is like a good Sauron's ring, in that it brings all of these elements of the story together, and the entire story, both in terms of its creation, has important implications, its loss has important implications, its potential recovery has major implications. And that's just the way ontologically humans like to tell epic stories. And for me, related to that, I would say, is that I've come to think that the Ark of the Covenant is essentially the incarnation of the Hebrew Bible. In the same way that in the New Testament we see, and this is explicit in John 1, where it talks about the Logos, the Word, taking on flesh and dwelling among us. It uses the languages of Exodus 40, in which God goes into the tabernacle and rests on the ark. Jesus is that full expression of taking on our flesh and
Yep.
living among us. But the ark is the first iteration of that, where God leaves the presence of Mount Sinai and dwells inside of this tent made of animal skins and gold, and dwells on this box. And so you can't really have the second incarnation with the big I without the first one. And it really ties the whole thing together.
Interesting.
The last point I'll say is it's fascinating that if it is the throne of God, which it is in the biblical text, it's the place Jesus returns to, where he is
Mhm.
seated at his ascension, is the very place that the whole story kind of revolves around. And so those are some, I could give you many more, but those are some hopefully short examples.
How did Gesher Media, the director, how did you choose which voices, who had a seat at the table in this discussion? Because, like you said, it brings us all together, but to elevate certain voices, what was the process? And tell me about that.
Yeah, we wanted to have a variety of voices. We wanted to have male, female. We wanted to have different ethnicities. We wanted to have Jewish perspectives and Christian perspectives of various types. And so those are the people that we ended up with. And so if I were to highlight one, Josh Berman, who is a rabbi and also a professor at Bar-Ilan University, it was his analysis of some of these texts and the New Kingdom Egyptian background associated with the Exodus that had first really got me excited and interested in exploring the Egyptian background of the tabernacle and the ark. Really,
Right.
this story. And so, by the way, he has a nice podcast he just launched called Bible Bar, and
Okay.
anyone go to Bar-Ilan. It's a wonderful place.
I'll write it down.
He was a natural person to ask, and I was thrilled to have him in the film as well as the others.
That's beautiful. I think hearing from different voices, especially local here, added a weight to it, and different documentaries or films that have been made in Israel, but without voices from within.
Yeah.
I feel like that added and grounded it in a really beautiful way. So I wanted to honor you and your team for that as well.
I would just add to that, Joe Uziel, who was part of the mishpacha of
Yeah.
family friends. I've known him for many years. He works with the Israel Antiquities Authority, the head of the Dead Sea Scrolls
Yeah.
unit, excavating all over the place, doing amazing work. And I've known him for so long. It was wonderful to have him in the film. And I would just say personally, having spent so much time in Israel and on these excavation projects, the presentation of it has implications for both Christians and Jews. But the research of real archaeology, the best place in the world to do that is not only in Israel, because that's where the stuff is, but it's Israeli archaeologists who are leading the charge in biblical archaeology. And so it was a natural place to bring them in with physicists like Erez Etzion and Josh Berman and Joe Ziel, as well as our kind of American counterparts.
Incredible. And this was the first time I heard about this technology. I don't remember the name of it, but the ability to scan underground. And I want to just hear your perspective. When did you discover this first? Was it from your friend? And really, how does this change the future of discoveries, especially in Jerusalem among religious areas?
Yeah, so the concept is muon detection.
Okay.
I'll let you watch the film
Yeah,
to
yeah,
really.
yeah.
I'm not a particle physicist, but essentially, Erez Etzion, who's a genius, brilliant, and most humble person, wonderful to interact with, who has his technology on the International Space Station, and also is studying dark matter in some of the lowest places on Earth, and also has a muon detector looking for
Hey.
just a Renaissance man. But essentially, the way it works is the detector is able to find voids in in places that you can't enter. So it can look through rock by looking for these muons, in much the same way that, as he describes in the film, an X-ray can look through your body.
Mhm.
And so I first heard about it mostly through the publications of this pilot project that was done in the city of David,
Mhm.
and it still has great possibilities for being able to be used specifically in Jerusalem. And I would encourage anyone to not only follow it, but if they're interested in supporting, to produce more of these. It could give us a lot of really interesting information about this black hole in archaeology, which is the Temple Mount, because it's inaccessible to the spade or to the trowel, but it is accessible potentially through these imaging techniques.
Very, very intriguing. And I'm excited and hopeful for what will come from that. I mean, we as the All Israel News team, I think it was about a year and a half ago, we went up and did a, half day dig, and I found a little like teacup handle or pot handle.
Today is the day that we found this handle of a kitchen pot here in the ancient city of Chorazin, right? Chorazin?
Yes.
And I was just, I
Yeah.
mean, I was over the moon because you're holding this piece of history. So I
Yep.
can't imagine even at another level when you're going underground and you're seeing things that have never been seen because you can't dig or you can't get to them in that way due to regulations, understandably, in the history. So it's really, really exciting. And I
Yeah.
know we're having such a great time talking, and I could ask you so many more questions, but I do want to save a lot for the film so people can discover along the way. But I did want to just talk to you about the film's opening, and the Jeremiah 23 piece, as well as the big question at the end. What would it mean if the ark was found today? I know that's a big question. You don't have to have the answer, but after all the research you've gone through, how do you wrestle with this? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that the film starts with a reference to Jeremiah 23, basically, why have you forsaken us? Where are you, God? And it ends with Jeremiah, I think it's 14, Lord, remember your glorious throne, as a reference to Jerusalem, but also I think a reference to the ark itself and the fact that Jerusalem is about to fall. And so I would say that part of the genius of the literature that is the Old Testament, that is the Hebrew Bible, is not only does it deal with the high points, it really does well with the low points. And it is these low points, the destruction of the temple, where so much of the biblical text is formed and fashioned and impacted, and Judaism as we have it today, which leads into Christianity and the different iterations, really emerges not only as a success story, but really a survival story.
Yeah.
And that's really at the heart of what the ark is all about. Does the ark, it's lost, does it survive? And if so, in what fashion? There's no question in my mind that it does survive in spirit. It does survive because it could never ultimately be destroyed because it was a copy anyway of God's throne itself. But as we think about the earthly one that was made at Sinai, I can't help but call on my lifelong of reading of C.S. Lewis and that last line in The Last Battle, in
Mhm.
which they're asking, how can all of these things be preserved? And Mr. Tumnus says, ultimately, no good thing is lost. And I really believe that. And I think the things that God makes, yeah, he can make things new, but he often does things that are completely unexpected and renews things that were lost. That becomes this amazing wonder of
Amen.
how he fulfills his own word. And I would just say to the audience, the very fact that even a week before the crucifixion, the disciples standing there don't believe Jesus, even though he explicitly says, "I'm going to go to Jerusalem, die, be raised from the dead, and then this whole process is going to happen." They don't believe him. They don't believe that this could happen. And so it was a real surprise. And so God can make. I like to say he's written the script, and he's the only person who's written the book and written the script where the movie's going to be much better than the script and the book
Mhm.
that comes from it. And if the arc has a role to play in that unfolding story, I can't wait to see what it will be. But I would also say to that, all three of the legends hint at its cosmic redemptive significance. And my favorite of the three is actually the legend of the rock, in which it envisions Moses and Aaron going to get the ark. So this is restored, redeemed, maybe resurrected Moses and Aaron going to its hiding place, taking it out of the rock, going back to Mount Sinai, and all Israel is assembled once more after they fled, like Zechariah 14, from the destruction of the city. They open the ark and God's spirit comes upon them. And just like Jeremiah 31, the giving of the new spirit, in much the same language we find in the New Testament. And so that's a Jewish expectation of God's spirit descending upon them. And so it's just a super rich subject because of all of these details.
Is there anything that you wanted to share that I didn't ask? Anything that you'd want the audience to know?
Yeah, yeah. So I'd say, as you can tell, I love this stuff. And we have a podcast called Biblical World Podcast that we do this kind of nerdy stuff, theological stuff, biblical world thing. But I'd also say if any of your listeners are interested in studying biblical archaeology in its context, the Lanier Center for Archaeology here at Lipscomb University is a wonderful place for doing that. We have projects in Israel, assuming the ceasefire holds. We will be at Ashdod of the Philistines later this summer, and then I will be at Bethsaida, the
Mhm.
home of Simon Peter and Andrew, later on this summer as well. So if
Wonderful.
you're interested in actually participating, like Kayla talked about before, be careful when you first pick up those pots or smell that ash. It can be quite addictive, and you spend your summers doing this. If you're ever interested, come join us. Come check out what we're doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. McKinney. And can you tell us how can people see it? Where can they watch Legends of the Lost Ark?
Yes, so Legends of the Lost Ark has a theatrical release. It's going to be on April 12th at many theaters throughout the country, and then April 14th and 15th. And I would say as soon as possible, go and get your tickets. They're going fast. And if you see them, yeah, we'd love for you to come out and see the theater and come and see the film. And the thing I would say, the first time I saw it just a couple days ago at Museum of the Bible, I saw it for the first time on the big screen. The experience of seeing it on the big screen is really different than watching it streaming because the director Stephen Pettit has put so much into this, not only in terms of the same cameras that they shot Top Gun Maverick on. So you have these depth of field that are just incredible, but the soundtrack is the score is really incredible. So it's really an immersive experience that's meant for the theater, and I would just encourage you to go check it out.
I could feel the level of excellence in the production value and in also the drama aspects that I wasn't expecting because I knew it was a documentary, but you're also seeing the story come to life in this very creative way. So, yes, I'd encourage any of you watching to find a showing near you if you have it. And if not, keep an eye out for the podcast and the university, and we will put some of that information in the caption so that you can find it. But thank you for your time, Dr. McKinney. I really appreciate it. And I hope our paths cross sometime when you're in Israel next.
Baruch Hashem. My pleasure.
All right. Have a wonderful night. Shabbat Shalom.